Okay. Got it turned on my side.
Sorry, I did thumbs up, but my camera's off and in the Spanish channel, so I couldn't talk, but sounds good.
Okay, cool. All right, I think, sorry, go ahead.
Do you want me to let people in?
Yep, Megan, Ashley, are you guys ready?
Yep.
Okay, cool. We're all good. Hi, everyone. Welcome in. We'll get started in just a few moments. Thanks for joining us today. All right, we may still be having some folks trickling in, but we're going to go ahead and get started since we have a packed agenda. First and foremost, hi and welcome to our second training, Making Effective Social Media Content and Staying Organized. This is a part of our three-part Social Media Essentials training series. And if you'd like, I know some folks have already started, we welcome you to drop your name and organization and where you're tuning in from in the chat. And as you do that, I'm going to also go over a couple of quick housekeeping items. There is live Spanish interpretation available for this training, and you can access it via the Zoom toolbar using the globe icon. Otherwise, we're using our standard Zoom practices that we've been using for quite some time now. Cameras are optional, but be ready to participate in poll questions and the worksheet activity, and to also share your experiences in the chat. And feel free to submit questions at any time in the chat, and we'll make sure to get back to you. If you have any issues, just reach out to us and we'll assist you. And just a note that we are recording this session. Both the recordings in English and Spanish, as well as the slide deck, will be available to everyone after the session ends. I'm really excited to introduce PGP and our training team today. Public Good Projects is a public health nonprofit that specializes in health communications. We work across public and private sectors to build programs that impact a wide spectrum of public health topics. And we partner with the CDC Foundation to bring you this three-part training series. My name is Darshana. I use she pronouns, and I'm your moderator today. I'm joined by my colleague Ashley, who will be supporting with engagement in the chat and answering any questions that you have. And we have back with us one of our amazing facilitators, Dr. Megan Barber, who is the editor-in-chief at PGP and founder of Public Good News, PGP's nonprofit newsroom dedicated to public health. And like I mentioned earlier, this is the second training of a three-part series that will cover the essential components of planning and executing social media for your organization. So in these training sessions, our facilitator will guide you through hands-on activities to develop a planning guide for your organization. So today's session will focus on developing a social media content framework. If you weren't able to attend the first training, my colleague Ashley is dropping a link in the chat to all of the Training 1 materials for your reference. There are old worksheets in there as well. Feel free to take a look at those. Today's guided activity will be broken down into 4 parts. And again, you'll have time to complete each section of the worksheet as we walk through it over the next hour. The worksheets are available in both English and Spanish. Our team members from the Urban Institute and the Pave Learning community are going to drop those in the chat now, and you can download those straight onto your computer and type in them directly. And by the end of this training session, we hope that you'll learn, best practices for communicating about science and building trust, no matter the medium, be able to identify and understand the different types of social media content, from static image posts to long-form videos, and also will help you create a plan for a social media asset that includes asset type, design, where it will live, and in-asset copy, a call to action, and post copy as well. So we're almost ready to get started. If you haven't yet downloaded that worksheet, make sure you have that handy. Again, you can find them in the chat. To get the most out of this training, fill out the worksheet as we walk through it, and we're here to answer your questions. So please feel free to drop them into the chat, or you can save them for the end, and hopefully we'll have some time to answer at the end as well. So with that, I will pass it over to Megan to get us started.
Great. Thank you so much, Darshana. Happy to be with you all here today. And we're going to start briefly with a few poll questions. So if you could go ahead and fill out this poll. It's very short, only 5 questions long, and it'll just help us understand a little bit more about what you're coming to this training with in terms of social media content expertise, and how you feel about your abilities to execute on a plan. So we've launched the polls questions. If you can go ahead and start filling those out, that would be excellent. Your answers will be anonymous, so we value your honest opinion for each of these questions. And we'll give you about a minute to go ahead and fill this out. For those of you that just joined, we're currently filling out a poll survey right now, and there's just short 5 questions to answer. I see the answers coming in, so thank you. We'll let a few of you finish up, and then we will get started with our training. Let's see, if you don't see the poll, I'm not sure if anyone from our tech team could help. Sometimes it pops up in a different window from your Zoom meeting window, so you kind of have to toggle to that. All right, let's do 15 more seconds if you could finish up. All right, thank you all so much. We're going to get started here with, first up is going to be talking about the information landscape in 2024. And this is important because we're focused today on how to make effective content for social media, but it's important to know the landscape that we're operating in. Because when we make content, it lives in this broader information ecosystem, and that has changed a lot over the last 5 years. So when we talk about information, we know that an abundance of information and the widespread use of social media have created problems that impact emergency response in public health crises. And this makes sense, right? In 2024, health information is spreading on more social media platforms with fewer restrictions than ever before. And as this slide here shows, health information is also politicized, which can be especially impactful during public health emergencies. Information is often misunderstood, misinterpreted, and reshared without being fact-checked. Another element is that false claims often spread faster than the truth. And this is in large part thanks to social media algorithms that reward engagement over accuracy. So some groups, especially communities that have been marginalized and those with vulnerable health statuses, are more at risk of exposure to inaccurate information than others. At the same time, trust in the healthcare system and health institutions, as well as public health officials, have all declined. Decades of standard public health policies, like vaccination in schools, are at risk of being undone. So I know this sounds pretty dire, and I don't mean to start off with such a negative outlook, but there is hope. And that's because while we know that false narratives are spreading, it doesn't mean that everyone believes them. People don't always believe misinformation or false claims, and this provides an opportunity to combat it. People are looking for accurate info. We just have to give it to them in the right way. And that starts with making effective, accurate content that people can trust. And that's what we're all about today. So in this next section, we're going to cover 5 tips or best practices for communicating about science and building trust no matter the medium. And these recommendations apply no matter whether you're talking on social media or in real life or in other contexts. So in the first training, we explained how to create a social media strategy. For those of you that were in attendance, you remember that identifying your audience is key to this process. So our first tip to making good content, no matter the medium, is to always know your audience. People care about different things. So you might remember that we asked things about people's age and gender, their educational background, their geographic location, things like their interests, values, and hobbies, what health concerns an audience might have, and then asking these 2 questions: what are the drivers and barriers to engaging with an org, and what is their level of trust? The answers to these questions influence not only what messaging you use, but also the type of content that you make and where you also might post that content. So when someone consumes information or a social media post, they're bringing their own context, history, and concerns. So that's why thinking about your audience and what they care about will help you tailor your social media content to them. Next up, number 2 is to always lead with the facts and communicate the gist. People have short attention spans. If social media proves nothing else, it definitely proves that. And they often remember the first thing that they hear. So the second tip for communicating about science or health is to remember to communicate the facts first. This is because of something called anchoring bias, which says that the first thing a person hears is often their anchor or what they remember. So if false information is the first thing someone hears about a health issue, they're more likely to believe it, even if accurate information is presented later. So what does this mean for social media content creation? This means that we need to start with the most important factual information first and be sure that we don't, as journalists say, bury the lead. Next, you'll see on here I have communicate the gist. And psychologists have done extensive research on the importance of the gist. What is this exactly? The gist captures the essence of a piece of information, or its bottom line meaning in context. Sometimes rumors or myths can be more compelling than accurate information when it provides an interpretation of reality that makes better sense than the facts. So in other words, sometimes false information communicates the gist better. Good content, however, whether it's on social media or the radio, all has one thing in common. It communicates the gist in a clear and memorable way. If someone can accurately summarize your content and its call to action in 1 sentence or less, you've done a good job communicating the gist. So when making content or communicating about science, ask yourself, what's the one thing you'd like to take away from this? You'd like someone to take away from this. Sometimes it can be helpful to brainstorm ideas by finishing the statement, quote, if you remember one thing, remember this. Of course, details are still important. The gist is about the big picture that you want someone to take away, but that doesn't mean you don't also include details. All right, we're going to keep going because we have lots to get through. So the third tip to communicating about science, or health in any medium is to make your content approachable. What does this mean exactly to be approachable? Well, first, you want to avoid jargon because too many stats might overcomplicate the issue. And you want to keep your content and language simple. You want to be aware of how people interpret data and statistics. For example, if someone hears that the flu shot is about 50% effective for adults this year, that doesn't sound particularly reassuring. It sounds like a 50-50 chance of getting the flu. But if you say that the flu shot will likely keep you out of the hospital and make it so that you can continue to be there for your family or go to work, that message might actually persuade people to get vaccinated. Next, you want to watch your tone. So being approachable means being kind, authentic, and humble. And in the first training of this series, we talked about identifying your organization's voice as part of your social media strategy. And once you've figured out your organization's personality or voice, you can use tone to make your content approachable. Sometimes this means using humor, which is something that we'll look at examples later. And authenticity means that you don't actually have to jump on every social media trend or on all platforms, but you need to make content that feels authentic and genuine for your organization's audience. Lastly, you want to connect your content to people's values, emotions, and priorities. So best practices in marketing and political science and business show that it's important to know what matters to an audience and then to appeal to those values. A pregnant person might worry about the potential side effects for themselves or their babies if they need a medical intervention, for example. So social media content for that audience might appeal to values of safety, family, and protection. Likewise, a teenager might care about going out with friends or being attractive to potential dating partners or stress at school. So an anti-vaping campaign might appeal to a teen's values of freedom, independence, or confidence in social situations. In both of those examples, the values that are being appealed to in a piece of content are just as important, if not more important, than the health facts you're trying to get across. And lastly, feel free to use stories and analogies because these can sometimes showcase values-focused content better than statistics or facts. People connect with images and stories of people. All right, our fourth tip is to say what you know, but also what you don't. And this sounds a little confusing, but let me explain. One of the most important communication lessons of the pandemic was the role of highlighting scientific consensus. We've learned that it's important to acknowledge when we don't have answers yet. Acknowledging what we don't know, ironically, actually reinforces trust and legitimizes you as an unbiased source. When we don't acknowledge gaps in knowledge or myths or rumors, when we don't acknowledge gaps in knowledge, sometimes myths, rumors, and conspiracy theories fill those gaps. It can also look like organizations or officials are hiding something. So acknowledging what you don't know is a way to show transparency. In sum, what this looks like in practice is to emphasize what you know to be true based on the best scientific evidence at the time. Then to acknowledge what you don't know yet, but then explain what people are doing to find those answers. And finally, I know this is a lot of information I'm throwing at you, but the last thing, the last tip to making effective content, no matter the medium, is to respond in a timely manner. And this can be hard in public health. I know we have a lot of approvals and sometimes things that slow down our response times. But just like the best medical interventions quickly addressing a person's needs, the best communication prevents and fills information gaps as quickly as possible. And this makes sense, right? In a health emergency, people are often looking for information from trusted sources. So part of increasing your organization's trust is to get accurate, approachable information to the public as soon as you can. False information often fills a vacuum. So while we're all trying to figure out what to say, myths or rumors might be circulating in that vacuum. It's important for organizations to know what's happening to have a plan for how to communicate things quickly, and then to execute that plan in a rapid manner. We, of course, know that depending on your organization, how fast you're able to respond may depend on those approvals or organizational structure or resources. Just do your best. Prioritize certain things and topics, and then advocate for timely responses whenever you can. All right, so we're now going to start to turn to how we actually apply these things to social media. So you'll want to have your worksheet handy on your computer, which I know has been dropped in the chat a few times, and we're going to drop another link so you can download it now. We'll provide a little bit of time to complete each section, and just making sure everyone knows it's okay to not finish everything. Make notes of your questions so we can connect at the end or after this training session, and be sure to keep this document because it will also reference it in the next training. What we're going to talk about now is all the different things that go into making social media content. So we talked a little bit about audience before. We're going to talk about making a social media asset, writing post copy, and checking for our best practices. All right, so first up is our audience and content pillars. And that's because we want to ground our content in who you want to reach and what you want your content to do. So if you attended the first training of this series, you probably have this information handy from our Training 1 worksheet. But if you don't, go ahead and complete part 1 of your worksheet and think through the audience that a social media asset that you might want to make could potentially target. So this worksheet will help us walk through all the different parts of making your social media asset. So at the end, you'll have an outline for an actual asset that you could make and use in your organization. So as you're filling out part 1 of your worksheet, think about who you are trying to reach. So this might include several audiences, some of which are more important than others. And these are often called priority or primary audiences. And it's important to remember that the general public doesn't cut it. So you'll recall the questions we asked about age and gender and education, background, geographic location, their interests, drivers and barriers to engaging with your org, and their level of trust. So remember, it's okay if you need to come back to this section later. But once you've figured out your audience, think about your content pillars. And the key here is what type of content could your organization focus on? And often I put these as verbs. So you'll see on the right side of this slide here, it says pick one content pillar. So your social media asset can either educate, which is what a lot of us do in health, right? It also might promote something. So promotional content is great for events or vaccination drives or meetups. Your social media content could also connect, and connection content might be asking people for how they feel about an issue, so asking questions to get responses. It might also connect to other partner work, so you could share another organization's posts or anything that is kind of like co-created. Social media content can also inspire, and inspirational content might include celebrating key dates, like Black History Month, for example. It could honor specific people, or maybe even highlight the success story of someone in your organization, or even someone in your audience. And then finally, social media content might entertain, and this could look like memes or pop culture references, humor, any videos that might use social media trends. And all of this type of content, I think that picking one of these pillars helps you focus a little bit to determine what type of content are you making and what you want your content to actually do. So as you're thinking about your audience and your content, be sure to keep in mind any gaps in skills that you might have in your ability to actually make this content. So are there topics or subjects that you need to discuss, but that you don't feel confident communicating about? Or maybe you need additional resources to do some sort of entertaining content. So just think about both your limitations and your resources as you're picking one of your content pillars. All right, so I'll give you about, let's see, 15 more seconds to complete part 1 of your worksheet, picking that content pillar. I'll take a sip of water. Okay. So now that we've identified our audience and our content pillar, next we're going to talk through the questions that you should ask yourself when you're actually making a social media asset and the elements that you might consider when you're developing those assets. So before we dive in, though, I want us to just have a set definition on what I'm actually talking about when I say social media assets, because there are a lot of different types of assets. And social media assets are often called creative assets. And this is the content that you post on your platforms. So whether you're posting something on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, now X, all of those are social media content. Usually we think about social media assets as being of 2 types. First would be what we call static assets. And the easiest ways to think about static assets are, these are assets that do not move. So they're text or image only, and it's without any video or movement. And that's in contrast to video or motion assets. These can include short or long form videos. So anywhere from a 2-second GIF with movement to a 20-minute video that's a lot of educational content. This is any type of graphic design that uses motion. So hopefully that helps us just when we're talking about social media assets most broadly. And in general, I always think about 3 elements working together to create our social media assets. So when you're creating a social media asset, these 3 things work together in tandem. We think about where it lives, the asset type, and what that asset type looks like, and finally, what exactly you're trying to communicate. And this is what we're going to go through now. So when we are thinking about where an asset is going to live, and this is whether it's a movement asset or a static asset, you want to ask yourself, does my audience spend time here? And then what type of content do they like to consume on that platform? This leads us to the second question, and we're going to talk through how each platform has its own image and video size requirements. And we want to make sure that we're making content that is tailored to the platforms we're posting it on. And we're going to come back to this with our examples. And lastly, the third section of what we'll talk about is what you're trying to communicate. And this is usually called your copy. And there are different elements to copy. One is usually the key message that you're trying to get across. And if you recall the gist and the leading with the facts, we want to focus on that. And usually we just try and do one key message per social media asset. And how much copy you're able to put on each asset depends on what type it is. So while a video can easily handle a longer script, a single static asset can only handle 1 or 2 sentences max. So when in doubt, we're going to edit. And how we say what we're trying to communicate is, like we mentioned about our organization's voice from training 1, you want this voice to be consistent across social media assets because this builds trust. Okay, so that's a preview. Now let's dive in. We'll turn to part 2A of your worksheet. And we're going to think about where the asset is going to live. So like we said before, we want to ask whether our audience spends time here. So maybe you've identified your audience as Spanish speakers in a particular neighborhood because you're trying to promote a vaccination drive that someone's hosting in a month. And so if you've identified your audience, you need to think about are they on each of these individual platforms, which you'll see some of these logos here. These are all just examples of the platforms you might be posting on. And what type of content they like to consume on each of those platforms might be different. So go ahead and think through, for part 2A, where do you want your asset? You've identified your audience and your content pillar. Where do you want your asset to live? Give you about 30 more seconds to fill that out. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the types of assets and where they work best. So if you don't have an answer to this, that's okay. Some of the material that we're working on coming up next can help hopefully provide some clarity. So let's dive in. What type of asset is it and what does it look like? This is the second key. These are the second key questions that you ask. And the answers to the questions here often influence both the type of asset you're making and the design of your asset. And the amount of work that goes into designing each social media asset can really be different according to the type of asset that we're talking about. So a 1-minute animated video, for example, could take someone months to finish, depending on the level of animation. While this example here, which is a static text-based asset, so this is, like we mentioned, a non-movement asset, this can be made in 5 minutes using design programs like Canva, or there's other things like Google Slides, Giphy, or Adobe Express. And so it's important to know that there are tools that can help you make assets, and some of them make things very quickly. It just depends on how much work goes into each one is contingent upon what type of asset it actually is. So we're going to walk through 8 different types of social media assets. And I know it's a long list, so stay with me. But I'm hoping that this helps you, especially if you are trying to figure out what platform you want to post on and or what type of assets do well on certain platforms. I'm hoping that this run through of 8 common types of social media content will give you a bit more detail to help answer the questions in your worksheet. So you know that there are static or movement assets, but we're going to dive a bit deeper. So images are static and can be viewed and appreciated instantly. So the colors, composition, or text, or sometimes the lack of text, give social media users an immediate impression of your organization. So this type of content can work really nicely in different types of Facebook and Instagram, where images are quite common. And it's important to remember a few tips for this type of content to work best. And that's to only use images you have permission for. So things like Creative Commons, or if you have a subscription to something like iStock, or Shutterstock, and you always want to provide credit. And then an important tip here is to include alt text or alternative text descriptions for your images on social media. And this is an important note about accessibility because that helps readers, audio readers and things like that, for people who have other needs, that they are able to still appreciate what's in an image because you've provided alt text for a way to describe it. You can also add music to images on Facebook and Instagram, which is kind of fun. And you'll see for each of these examples, there's some pros and some cons. So the pro of static images is that it can be very easy to produce, and it can often highlight events and the real people in your community, which is great because you want to showcase that whenever you can. But the con here is that it can be hard to communicate a lot of information. And like I mentioned, images often work best on Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest. So those are images. Most of this might seem like, duh, Megan, of course I know this. However, I think it's just helpful to have some of this common language to operate off of. And then as we get more complicated in our types of social media assets, you'll appreciate these different definitions. So next up, after images, is text-based posts. And you've probably seen these a lot in public health. And text-based posts can do a great job of using the power of words to explain complicated topics and provide clear information. It's also great for promoting events or organizational announcements. And it can even start conversations and be a good way to build community and trust. It's especially helpful in public health emergencies to communicate timely info because people can share these types of assets with their followers. So some great tips here is you want to make sure to create an outline or the scripts first, and you want to choose easy to read fonts. You also want to make sure you're never including too much text. So this example on the screen is from Johns Hopkins public health account, and they do a great job of grabbing your attention. This is very easy to read, bold text, and it's clean and simple. And whenever you have too much text for one card or slide, consider using carousels because this allows you to put more text on multiple slides. And you want to make sure that you're able to get that information across and people swipe to get more, but you're not overwhelming them with just too much text on one screen. You also want to make sure to ensure accessibility in colors and text so the right type of font, make sure it's readable, and then ensure that the colors are accessible. You wouldn't want to put, red font on a green background, for example. Okay, the pros for this is obviously you've seen this a lot in public health. It can convey credibility and subject matter expertise. It's great to get a lot of info to people and usually easy to produce. And sometimes these can take a little time to make, depending on how much creativity you're adding to the actual design. And these often work on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and sometimes Instagram. Next up, we're going to go through infographics. So what are infographics? These usually explain statistics, processes, or other complex ideas using charts, graphs, and flowcharts. And you've seen these online too. And these can be really evocative because they use the power of graphics to tell a story that might otherwise be lost with words. So tips here, you want to create an outline first, choose easy to read fonts. think about using your branding colors, which you can use to change the colors of the bar charts and keep it clean and simple. And these can be, like I said, impactful way to tell stories from data. However, you want to think about this can require a lot of time to create a nice graphic. And it does require, research and accuracy to get the facts right. You'll see that this is from your local epidemiologist or Dr. Caitlin Jetelina. And this type of graphic is perfect for her audience, right? Who include a lot of public health. This might be a little too obscure for sometimes the general public. So just be aware of what type of infographic would best appeal to your audience. Where these work is often Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and sometimes Instagram as well. All right, we're going to keep rolling through. Next up, and this one's pretty simple, so we can probably breeze through it. URLs or website links to other content. So what is this? Well, this is links that you can use to help drive people to your website, your newsletter signups, articles, blogs, or other trustworthy accounts. And this happens because when you drop a link into something like Facebook, it will auto-populate a social media card, and you can just use that to post information. This gives you the opportunity to share more details or go beyond the limits of character counts and drive people to another site. The cons here is it's not as captivating or as easily engaging as other content. So while it does do a great job of sharing more details with a single click, you maybe won't get as much engagement as other types of posts. This can work well on LinkedIn, especially if let's say you have a newsletter that's brand new and you want to drive people there, as well as Pinterest. Lots of public health isn't on Pinterest, but Twitter and Facebook, this also can work especially well and something to consider as part of your content mix. Okay, we're almost there. The next step is stories. And for those of you who are on social media a lot, this is hopefully familiar, but stories are images and short videos that last only 24 hours before they disappear for good. And these are produced in social media apps like Instagram and Facebook. And the tips here are you don't actually need to have something to be super high quality or highly produced. It's great for kind of doing a quick hitting announcement for an event. And you want to leverage the tools and the templates in the apps. So you can add stickers and change text colors. And it can just be something that is kind of done in the app as opposed to having to have a creative team. And this is great for keeping people updated about events, announcements, or other quick hits of information. But the main con here is that it's a very short life expectancy, right? So you only have 24 hours and then they disappear. Excuse me. This also usually requires someone like a social media expert or someone who's willing to be a social media manager to work in the app, which can be a little challenging if you're not familiar. But this is great to incorporate for engagement because Facebook and Instagram really want people to interact with in the stories section of the app. And if your audience is interacting there, then they're more likely to prioritize your content elsewhere. Next up, we have GIFs and memes, which you've all seen these, and they're actually a little bit going out of style, but still important to consider. A GIF is an image that shows a brief animation, and a meme is something that is remixed or copied to add new meaning. Clearly eye-catching. You don't need to jump on every trend, but if you do, make sure that the text is readable. This can be really humorous and shareable, This is another example from Johns Hopkins, who do a great job with humor on their account. Can be really relatable. But just be careful because it's hard to nail it, and you can even seem out of touch. So just something to consider. And these can work in different contexts. You can see on screen there. All right, the last two we went through before you pop into your worksheet again is short form videos. This is something that's usually 1 minute or less. Can be really, really short, even 10 seconds. It breaks things down quickly in 1 or 2 points. These are usually shot vertically and are on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook Reels, also YouTube Shorts. And things to think about here, these are really powerful, but people talking direct to camera often do best. So you want to start with a hook and include a CTA, and then don't include text on the bottom, 1/3 of the asset. If you see on the example here from Dr. Vicky Chan, who's an amazing doctor to follow on TikTok, you'll see that the text is above where her information is on the TikTok app. So you just want to keep them above that section. Very engaging, but can be resource intensive because, like I said, direct to camera often works best, and it's hard to find someone willing to be on camera. Lastly, long form video. These are usually videos longer than a minute. And this is best for educational and informational style videos. These can go everywhere, but usually YouTube and Facebook, they do best. Some tips here, and why don't you guys go ahead and start completing part 2B of your worksheet. But I want you to think through including subtitles for accessibility, really important, and because people often are watching your videos without sound, so you need subtitles so they can still get the main points. You want to select a good thumbnail image. That's the image that appears in your feed before someone plays the video. That makes it look the most appealing. And these are great for talking to expert voices, which this was an example from the CDC when Dr. Mandy Cohen first joined, and they started some Q&As. The pros here, lots of time in this content. Cons are heavy on the resources, and you often need some storytelling skills. All right, so we're going to keep going. I know things are busy, but hopefully you were able to complete part 2B of your worksheet. We've talked about where your asset's going to live, what type of asset it is, and we just went through all of those different options. And now we're going to jump into what you're trying to communicate. So the words that you're using to communicate are called your copy. And I know we are speeding through the concepts here, so keep bearing with me. We're getting through a lot, but I think this is helpful. And there are 3 different types of copy, and you can see them diagrammed here on this post, which is from the Public Good News. And A, which is the copy above the picture on this example, is called your in-asset copy. These are the words that you use in your asset, and these could be text, but if it's in a video, it could also be voiceover from a script. You would probably still have captions on there, but you could include scripts as part of your in-asset copy. Next up, you'll see that you usually are going to include a call to action. And this is whatever you're asking someone to do. What is the point of the social media asset? And you'll see that that is highlighted on B there. And this is inside what we call post copy. And post copy is the text that is accompanying any post on social media. So we're going to first write our in-asset copy. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see I'm going to ask you to complete part 2C of your worksheet. So you know your audience, you know what kind of asset you're making, you know where it's being posted. Now I want you to think through, what do I want to say? So what key messages are you trying to get across? Try to think of just 1 or 2 things and go ahead and complete part 2C of your worksheet. As y'all are doing that, I'm going to remind you to think through how much copy you're able to put on there. It depends on what type of asset it is. So a video means more copy. A single static asset means just 1 or 2 sentences. And if you're having a hard time, edit it down. The best thing you can do is try and keep things simple. And that will help ensure that people are able to, receive your message in the clearest way possible. All right, so if you've written down on part 2C of your worksheet, hopefully even if it's not the perfect copy, you have an idea of what you might want to include for your in-asset copy. Next up, we're going to dive into what your CTA is. And as I mentioned, a CTA means a call to action. So once you know who you're talking to and what you're trying to say and how you want to say it, you want to consider telling people what you want them to do. So your CTA should align with your organizational goals and your social media objectives. And a CTA can be a lot of different things. And I want you to complete part 2D of your worksheet. And feel free, even if you don't know how to write your CTA yet, think about what you can just pick one of these categories and you'll see them here. It might include liking or sharing the social media post. And yes, you can ask people in your post copy to do that, like or share this post. Sometimes the human brain needs that reminder. You might be asking people to share feedback, like commenting on a post or reacting. Maybe you're asking them to engage in a poll or add their sticker on Instagram. You might ask them to be committing to a cause or to raise awareness. Maybe clicking on a link or signing up for something like a registration or a newsletter. Referring a friend, donating, and volunteering are all CTAs. So building trust over time means that more people are likely to fulfill and follow through on your CTA. So this is something that, we should just consistently work on, and over time, hopefully people start, taking you up on your offer on what you're asking them to do. All right, so you've done your key message and in-asset copy. You just worked on and thought through, what do you want your CTA to be? Now we're going to do our post copy, which is the text that supports your social media asset. So much talking. Thank you, guys. All right, so when we are writing post copy or social copy for social media, remember that all of the examples we've looked at so far today all had what we call post copy. That's the text that accompanies a post on social media. And you've heard me call it a few different things: post caption, written caption, post text, or social copy all mean the same thing. And you can see all of these are the post copy examples from all of the visual examples that were earlier in our presentation. So the best practices for writing post copy, and we're only going to list 3 here because or on this slide, and then we have a couple more. But it's a lot of the same best practices for science communication in general. Making the first sentence count. So many social media users will only read your first sentence, so make sure it's engaging. And as we mentioned earlier, adding the facts first is important, since that's what people will remember. You also want to be conversational. So remember, one of our other tips was to be approachable. So think about conversational text and avoid anything that's too academic. And then identify the goal of the copy and write with that in mind. So are you trying to connect with your audience? Are you asking them to do something specific, like your CTA? Are you informing them about health information? Understand your goal and write with that in mind. Next, on this next slide, I want you to complete part 3 of your worksheet while I go ahead and talk through these last 3 tips. And the first is to make the copy clear, but adapt it to each platform. So no one really wants to read super long captions. I don't, I'm sure you don't. So be aware about Twitter or X's character max and writing for clarity and brevity. Tag relevant people or handles because this increases your shares and reach. And use hashtags. So these provide extra reach as well, especially on Instagram and X. And aim to use around 3 hashtags per post. And you can search, there's plenty of articles that will tell you how to search for what hashtags are trending now. So that, hopefully you've been writing part 3 of your worksheet. I'm going to give you 1 more minute to finish. Okay. Wasn't quite a minute, but we're going to keep going so that we have enough time. And the last thing to do is now you have the outline of what your social media asset could look like, right? You've identified your audience and all of that, and we've moved forward. I want you to review what you have down there against the best practices that we've already talked about. So on the next slide, you have part of this on part 4 of your worksheet as well. So just double check, is your social media asset a good fit for your audience and platform? Does it lead with the facts and communicate the gist? Is your content approachable? If relevant, are you saying what you know and also what you don't? And does the asset feel timely? So just jot down some notes as you're thinking through these things. And not every asset needs to do all of these things, right? But just looking back and considering how many of these things can you hit at once? And the more you hit, the better that asset might be. I'll let you spend about 30 more seconds. I know I packed everything in here, y'all, for this training. We are going all the way up to the last minute. Okay. Feel free to keep writing those notes down, but we're going to recap here on what we've learned. And as you remember, we thought about our audience and we thought about what do we want our content to do? So educate, inspire, connect, all of those things are content pillars. And you chose what you wanted your asset to do. And then we walked through what type of asset it is. And that was based on where it's going to live, whether it was a good fit for your audience. And then we identified your key messages and your CTA. We use those key messages and CTA to write all of the copy that you needed, including the post copy. And then lastly, we double checked for our best practices. This type of outline is something you guys can do every time you're thinking about social media assets, and it starts to become second nature. And hopefully doing this throughout the last hour and using this worksheet give you a little taste of what that could look like. So the last thing I'll leave you all with today is just to think about these things. What parts of your worksheet do you still have questions on, right? There's gaps here. Maybe you've identified that you need more information from a fellow staff member. Maybe you realize there's a gap in staffing and that you don't have what you need to make the kind of assets that your audience would benefit from. Are there questions about what asset type is right for your chosen social media platforms and what your organization is currently posting on? And then think through which part of your social media content plan excites you most, because this is fun work. It's also challenging. So I think that these questions can hopefully help get the juices flowing. All right, with 1 minute left, I'm going to ask y'all to go ahead and do the Zoom poll, the last Zoom poll again. We're going to launch this poll now. And I want to just say thank you for all of you who stuck it out with us here. I know this is a lot of information and spending the last 60 minutes with us. We hope that you learned something new today. And this poll, for those of you that don't mind, just really helps us understand, where we started and where we ended with this training. So if you could go ahead and fill that out. Thank you. I see some of the answers coming in. And then our training program is, we're going to launch that. Yep. So here is the training program schedule. We hope to see you all at the next training in March. And Ashley will drop the registration link, which she did. Thank you, Ashley, for the upcoming training session. And we really hope to see you all there. And we can leave that on the screen for a second. Thank you all for those of you who are finishing the post survey. And I'm available. I know it's time, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. How can I help? Are there any questions from this group? Either you're welcome to come off mute, or you can throw a question in the chat. Thank you all for who is participating in the poll, but any questions I can answer. Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate you joining. All right. Well, I'll let this the poll let you all finish your answers there. And then we just really hope to see you at the next training, and wish you all a lovely Tuesday. So go ahead and finish up. Oh, it looks like we have all the poll responses. So thank you. And we'll hopefully see you all next time. Thank you all.